I trusted my uncle with the books for my shop. He forged my signature on 23 checks and funneled $137,400 into shell companies registered to his girlfriend's apartment. I only found out because my CPA noticed the write-offs didn't add up. I never thought I'd be sitting across from a detective at the Galveston County Sheriff's Office, sliding a folder full of forged checks across the table. Checks with my name on them that I never signed. But there I was, 34 years old, looking at proof that the man who bounced me on his knee at family barbecues had stolen $137,000 from me. My Uncle Roy, my dad's brother. The guy I gave a job to when nobody else would. And when I finally confronted him, you know what he said? Your daddy would have shared. You were always too greedy to be a real Holloway. That one sentence almost hurt worse than the money. Let me back up. I grew up in Galveston, Texas. My dad, Earl Holloway, was a shrimper, worked the Gulf his whole life. Never had much money, but everyone on the docks respected him. He was the kind of man who'd hand you his last $20 and never bring it up again. He died of a heart attack when I was 24, dropped right there on the boat. No warning, no goodbye. I didn't handle it well, but I handled it the only way I knew how. I worked. I'd been turning wrenches on marine diesels since I was 16, apprenticing under old-timers at the Galveston marinas, guys who could diagnose a Caterpillar 3406 by sound alone. They taught me everything. So at 26, I scraped together $12,000, my entire savings, plus a small life insurance payout from my father. I leased a cinderblock garage off Harborside Drive and opened my own shop. For 3 years, it was just me, a rolling tool chest, and word of mouth. I specialized in Caterpillar and Cummins marine diesel rebuilds, the kind of precision work most shops in Galveston outsourced to Houston. Charter captains started calling, then commercial shrimpers, then offshore crew boats. By year 5, I had 3 full-time mechanics, a parts inventory worth $80,000, and annual revenue pushing $700,000. By year 8, Holloway Marine Diesel was pulling in $1.2 million annually. I'd moved into a proper shop on 61st Street, 2 service bays, a paint booth, and a small front office with actual air conditioning. I was proud. Not flashy, not rich, but built something real proud. The kind of pride my dad would have understood. Then Uncle Roy lost his job. He'd been a dispatcher at a regional trucking company out in Beaumont for almost 15 years. Company downsized, let him go. He was 58, recently divorced, and sleeping on his older sister's couch. My mom called me one evening and said, "Your daddy would want you to help his brother." She didn't have to say it twice. I didn't even think about it. Blood was blood. I brought Roy on as the bookkeeper, $15 an hour. Gave him access to QuickBooks, the business checking account, and the vendor payment system. He didn't have an accounting degree, but he'd handled invoices and purchase orders at the trucking company for years. It seemed like a natural fit. At first, Roy seemed grateful, genuinely grateful. He showed up on time every morning, kept the invoices filed neat, even brought kolaches to the shop on Fridays. The guys loved him. I loved having him around. He told stories about my dad that made me laugh so hard I'd have to set my wrench down. It felt like I had a piece of my father back in that shop. But small things started to not add up. Supply costs crept up quarter over quarter. Nothing dramatic, just a slow climb. A few checks cleared that I didn't remember authorizing. I chalked it up to being too busy. I was elbow deep in engine blocks 12 hours a day. I didn't have time to track every single purchase order. That's why I hired Roy in the first place. My girlfriend Kendra mentioned something one night over dinner. She said she'd seen Roy buying rounds at a bar on the seawall, flashing cash like he'd hit a scratch off. I shrugged it off. He's probably just happy to have a paycheck again, I told her. She gave me a look. The kind of look that says, "I'm not going to push this, but I think you're wrong." I should have listened. 19 months went by like that. Roy in the office, me in the shop. Business was good. Life was good. I had no reason to suspect anything. Then in March, my CPA, Marina Chen, called me on a Tuesday afternoon. I was underneath a Cummins QSM-11 when my phone rang. I almost didn't answer, but something told me to pick up. Marina's voice was calm but tight, the way someone sounds when they're trying not to scare you. She said, "Darren, we need to talk about some write-offs that don't make sense." She paused. "And I think you need to sit down for this." Marina Chen didn't do dramatics. She was a quiet, methodical woman who'd been doing my taxes and quarterlies for 5 years out of her office on Broadway. So when she asked me to come in that same afternoon, not next week, not at my convenience, today, I knew something was wrong. I wiped the diesel grease off my hands, told my lead mechanic, Tomas, I'd be back in an hour, and drove across town. Marina had printed out 3 months of bank statements, vendor invoices, and canceled checks. She'd arranged them on her conference table like evidence at a trial. I was reconciling Q4 and Q1, she said, and I kept finding write-offs to vendors I've never seen before. She pointed to 3 company names: Gulf State Industrial Supply, Bayside Parts Direct, Coastal Engine Components. None of them appeared in any marine parts database Marina could find. None had websites. None had a Texas Comptroller registration older than 14 months. And all 3 had received checks with my signature on them. I stared at those signatures. They looked close to mine. The slant was right. The D was right. But the pressure was wrong. I'm left-handed. I bear down hard when I sign. Always have. These signatures were light, almost careful, like someone tracing rather than writing. My stomach dropped. There was only one other person with access to the checkbook. I drove straight back to the shop. Roy was sitting in the front office, feet up, scrolling his phone. I closed the door behind me. "Roy, I need to ask you something, and I need you to be straight with me." He barely looked up. "What's up, nephew? Who are Gulf State Industrial Supply, Bayside Parts Direct, and Coastal Engine Components?" The phone came down. His expression didn't change, but his eyes did. Just for a second, a flicker. "Parts vendors. I set them up when your usual guys were back-ordered last summer. Marina can't find any of them registered with the state. No websites, no storefronts, no phone numbers that go anywhere." Roy stood up slowly. "Your girl Marina doesn't know the marine supply business like I do. Half these outfits work out of warehouses. They don't need a fancy website." "Then explain why my signature is on checks I never signed." Silence. 5 seconds. 10. I could hear the compressor running in Bay 2 through the wall. Roy's jaw tightened. He looked at me the way you look at someone you've decided isn't worth lying to anymore. "You were always like this. Paranoid. Counting every nickel." He grabbed his jacket off the back of the chair. "Your daddy would have shared. You were always too greedy to be a real Holloway." "Get out of my shop, Roy." He left. Didn't slam the door. Didn't argue. Just walked out like a man who'd already planned for this moment. My hands were shaking when he was gone. Not from fear, from fury. I locked the front office, pulled every checkbook and ledger from the filing cabinet, and started going through 19 months of records, line by line. Every check stub, every deposit slip, every vendor invoice. By 9 that night, sitting under the fluorescent lights with cold coffee and a yellow legal pad, I'd flagged 43 suspicious transactions totaling over $100,000. Some were checks to those 3 fake companies. Others were cash deposits that came up short against the service invoices. A few were supply invoices, inflated by 30–40% over what I knew the parts actually cost. I called Marina at home. "I need a forensic accountant," I told her. "The best one you know." She didn't hesitate. She'd already suspected the scope was bigger than what she'd shown me. She told me later she hadn't wanted to say the number out loud until she was sure. She gave me one name, Lyle Batiste, forensic accountant out of Houston. 15 years untangling fraud for small businesses, insurance companies, and the occasional divorce attorney. "He's not cheap," Marina warned me. $300 an hour. But if your uncle did what I think he did, Lyle will find every penny. I told her to make the call. Within 72 hours, Lyle Batiste was sitting in my shop with 2 laptops, a leather briefcase full of bank record request forms, and a calm, deliberate way of asking questions that made me realize this man had seen 100 versions of my story. He'd already pulled the comptroller filings and the 3 shell companies. He'd already cross-referenced the check amounts against the deposit records I gave him. And then he asked me a question that made my blood run cold. "Does your uncle have a girlfriend?" Because two of these shell companies are registered to the same residential address in Texas City. Lyle Batiste worked for 3 weeks straight. He set up in my front office like it was a field command post. 2 laptops, a portable printer, and a whiteboard he brought from his own office in Houston. He obtained bank records through my business accounts and cross-referenced every outgoing payment against verified vendor databases. Marine parts distributors, diesel supply houses, filter and gasket wholesalers, every legitimate company I'd ever done business with, and then he isolated the ones that didn't belong. The results were devastating. The 3 shell companies, Gulf State Industrial Supply, Bayside Parts Direct, and Coastal Engine Components, were all registered at a single address on 5th Avenue North in Texas City. That address belonged to a woman named Denise Trevino, Roy's girlfriend of 2 years. A detail Roy had never mentioned to anyone in the family, not once. Lyle identified 47 forged checks, totaling $89,200. Each one bore a convincing but forensically distinguishable forgery of my signature. Lyle contracted a handwriting analyst out of San Antonio, who confirmed the signatures were written by a right-handed individual, mimicking a left-handed slant. The pressure patterns were all wrong, consistent with tracing, not natural handwriting. But the checks were only part of it. On at least 23 occasions over 19 months, Roy had made the daily bank deposits, but shorted them, skimming between $200 and $600 each time. Cash payments from customers that never made it to the bank. $14,600 gone. He'd also inflated supply invoices from legitimate vendors. He'd take a real invoice for $6,000, alter it to read $7,800, pay the real amount, and pocket the difference. Another $33,600 in overpayments where Roy intercepted the refund checks before I ever saw them. Total confirmed losses, $137,400 over 19 months. When word reached Roy that I'd hired a forensic accountant, he didn't retreat. He went on offense. He started calling family members, my mom, my cousins in Beaumont, my Aunt Linda in Port Arthur. He told them I was trying to destroy my own blood over a bookkeeping misunderstanding. He said I'd always been jealous of how close he was to my dad. He said I was paranoid and greedy. Then he showed up at my mother's house and cried, sat at her kitchen table and told her I was ungrateful, that Earl would be ashamed of me, that I was being set up by that Chinese accountant woman. My mother told me later that comment was the moment she stopped feeling sorry for him. Marina Chen was born in Galveston. Her family's been in Texas longer than ours. 2 of my cousins called me the same week. "Handle it in the family," one of them said. The other one said, "You're really going to put Uncle Roy in prison over some money? You make $1 million a year, Darren. Just let it go." Roy's girlfriend, Denise, called my shop and left a voicemail. She said she'd tell everyone what kind of family you really are if I didn't drop the investigation. I saved that voicemail. I'll be honest, I had a moment of doubt. I sat in my truck outside the shop one night, staring at a photo of my dad on my phone, wondering if he really would have just let it go. If maybe I was wrong for doing this. Then I looked at the number again. $137,400. That was more than my startup capital times 10. That was 2 mechanic salaries for a year. That was the down payment on the new hydraulic lift I'd been saving for. Roy hadn't made a mistake. He hadn't borrowed money he planned to pay back. He'd built a system, a deliberate, methodical system to steal from his dead brother's son. I called Lyle and Marina together. I want a criminal referral and a civil suit. Both. Marina connected me with a business litigation attorney named Teresa Vaughn in Houston. We prepared a package: the forged checks, the fake invoices, the bank discrepancies, and Lyle's full forensic report. 62 pages. We walked it into the Galveston County Sheriff's Office together. But Lyle did one more thing. He personally contacted Denise Trevino's landlord and obtained a notarized affidavit confirming that Denise had listed Roy Holloway as a co-occupant on her lease. That put Roy directly at the address where all 3 shell companies were registered. Lyle told me, "I've seen uncles steal from nephews, partners steal from partners, but this was methodical. He wasn't desperate. He was comfortable. That's worse." That affidavit became the linchpin of everything. 2 weeks later, the detective assigned to my case called me on a Thursday evening. His voice was matter-of-fact, but careful. "Mr. Holloway, we've got enough. We're picking him up tomorrow morning." He paused. "But I want you to know, your uncle's already trying to cut a deal, and he's saying things about you that you're going to want to hear before this goes public." Roy was arrested at Denise Trevino's house in Texas City at 7 in the morning on a Wednesday. 2 deputies from the Galveston County Sheriff's Office. He was charged with forgery, a state jail felony, and theft of property over $100,000. Under the Texas Penal Code, that's a second-degree felony, 2 to 20 years. His bail was set at $75,000. Denise posted it through a bail bondsman that same afternoon. Roy's public defender tried to negotiate before the preliminary hearing even started. He claimed Roy had been confused about the bookkeeping, that the shell companies were consulting fees Roy believed he was owed for managing the office, that this was a family dispute that should be resolved in mediation, not criminal court. The assistant DA had Lyle's 62-page forensic report on her desk. She wasn't buying a word of it. At the preliminary hearing, I sat 3 rows behind the prosecution table. Roy turned around once and looked at me. He didn't look angry anymore. He looked small, old. His orange jail scrubs hung off him like they were 2 sizes too big. For half a second, I saw my father's face in his. The same jaw, the same deep-set eyes. I had to look away. During a recess, Roy was allowed to speak to me in the hallway, both attorneys present. "Darren, I know I messed up." "You didn't mess up, Roy. You stole from me. You forged my name. You created fake companies for 19 months. I was in a bad place. Denise needed things. I got in over my head. You told my mother I was greedy. You told my cousins I was tearing the family apart. You dragged Marina's name through the mud. You did all of that while you were stealing from me." Roy looked at the floor. The fluorescent lights in that courthouse hallway buzzed overhead. "What do you want me to say?" "Nothing. I wanted you to be the man my dad thought you were, but you're not." The case didn't go to a full trial. Roy's attorney negotiated a plea. Guilty on the theft charge. Forgery charge reduced. Roy received 5 years of probation, 200 hours of community service, and the court ordered full restitution of $137,400. Payments garnished from any future wages. If he missed a single payment, he'd serve 18 months in Huntsville. The evidence package became semi-public through court filings. My cousins in Beaumont went quiet. The 2 who'd told me to let it go never called to apologize. But they stopped calling Roy, too. My Aunt Linda in Port Arthur sent me a handwritten letter on yellow notebook paper. It said, "Your daddy didn't raise you to be walked on. I'm sorry I didn't see it sooner." I keep that letter in my desk drawer. Denise Trevino moved out of the Texas City house within a month. Roy ended up back on his sister's couch, the same couch he'd been sleeping on before I gave him a lifeline. 6 months after the sentencing, Roy showed up at my shop, unannounced. He stood in the parking lot with his hands in his pockets. I saw him through the bay door. I set down my wrench and walked out. "I started the restitution payments," he said. "First one cleared last week." I nodded. "Good." He waited, like he expected something more. A handshake, an invitation inside. Some signal that the door was still open. I just said, "I hope you figure it out, Roy, but you can't be here." He left. We haven't spoken since. I hired a full-time office manager named Sandra, 15 years of experience and her own CPA license. I implemented dual signature requirements on any check over $500. Switched to an electronic payables system with full audit trails. Gave Marina Chen quarterly access to every account. No more blind trust. No more family favors with the checkbook. Revenue dipped slightly the year everything came out. The distraction, the legal fees. Lyle's invoices alone ran close to $9,000. But by the following year, Holloway Marine Diesel was back to $1.3 million and growing. I put a down payment on that hydraulic lift, brought on a fourth mechanic, started thinking about a second location in Kemah. My dad used to say that family is the one thing you can't replace. And he was right. You can't. But he also taught me that a man's name means something. When Roy forged my signature on those checks, he didn't just steal money. He stole my name. And I spent 8 years building that name, one engine at a time, with grease under my fingernails and diesel in my lungs. Nobody gets to take that from me. Not for $137,000. Not for blood. Not for anything. Trust is earned. And verification isn't paranoia. It's respect for yourself, for what you've built, and for the people who actually deserve to be in your corner.